Isla stepped out of the small mountain bus with a slow, deep breath, as if her lungs were tasting fresh air for the first time in years. The breeze was cool and gentle, completely different from the busy, dusty streets she had left behind in the city. Large mountains stood around her like quiet giants, their tops covered with white snow, their shadows stretching across the valley like calm blankets. For a moment, Ayla simply stood still, letting the silence settle inside her. She had come here alone, carrying only a backpack and a tired heart. She had planned this trip for weeks, but told no one about it. In the city, her life was full of noise, car horns, crowded roads, phone notifications, and memories she didn't want to revisit. She felt trapped, as if every sound there reminded her of something she was trying hard to forget. Here, in the mountains, everything felt softer, quieter, almost healing. The small village she arrived in had only a few wooden houses, a little store, and a single tea stall where smoke rose gently from a metal kettle. Isla liked how simple everything looked. There were no tall buildings, no traffic, no rush. People walked slowly, talked softly, and smiled easily. It felt like a different world. Ayla carried her backpack and started walking toward the guest house she had booked. Her shoes stepped on little stones, making soft, crunching sounds. Birds were chirping above her, and the river near the village created a peaceful, musical sound. Every few seconds, she looked around with amazed eyes, taking in every detail, afraid she might miss something beautiful. She had only one plan for this trip: explore the mountains at her own pace. She wanted to breathe deeply, walk slowly, and let her mind rest after years of tension. She wanted to forget the heavy parts of her past, the long hospital stays, the silent days of recovery, the way people looked at her with pity. She had survived the hardest chapters of her life, but carrying the memories still felt difficult. When she reached the guest house, she checked in politely, keeping her voice calm and friendly. The caretaker showed her a small but neat room with a large window facing the hills. Ayla placed her bag on the bed and moved the curtains aside, looking out with a soft smile. The mountains looked close enough to touch. After resting for a short while, she decided to go out and explore before the sun set. She took her camera, her water bottle, and a light scarf. She had heard from someone at the bus stop that there was a beautiful viewpoint nearby. Without asking for details, Ayla trusted her steps and followed a narrow dirt path leading upward. The path was peaceful. Tall pine trees lined both sides, their leaves dancing gently with the wind. The ground smelled of moist earth and fallen needles. Every now and then, she stopped to take photos of a bright yellow bird sitting on a branch, of the sun rays slipping between the trees, of a small wooden bridge over a tiny stream. Everything felt magical to her, like she had stepped into a painting. But Ayla did not realize she had taken a wrong turn. The path slowly became steeper and quieter. There were no signboards, no footprints, no other visitors. Still, Ayla walked on, trusting her sense of direction, unaware that she was entering a part of the mountain that locals usually avoided without a guide. Suddenly, a low voice behind her broke the quiet. "Stay back from that trail." Ayla jumped slightly and turned around quickly. Standing a few steps away was a tall man with a strong, rugged look. His clothes were simple: a thick jacket, worn-out boots, and a cap pushed low over his forehead. His eyes were sharp, scanning her and the surroundings with careful attention. He held a walking stick in one hand, and his whole posture showed that he knew these mountains well. Ayla blinked in surprise, feeling her heart beat a little faster. She wasn't used to strangers speaking so directly. I'm just trying to reach the viewpoint," she said softly. "Is this not the right way?" The man shook his head, his expression firm. "No. This path leads deeper into the forest. It's not safe for someone who doesn't know the area." His voice was not loud, but it had a rough edge, as if he had warned many careless visitors before. Ayla felt a bit embarrassed. She didn't want to appear irresponsible or silly. She hugged her scarf closer around her shoulders and nodded quietly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I must have taken a wrong turn." The man didn't soften. He pointed behind her. "The safe trail is down that way. Stay on marked paths. These mountains are not as simple as they look." Ayla gave a small nod again, feeling slightly scolded like a child. She didn't argue, didn't explain why she had come here, didn't mention how much she needed this peace. She simply turned around and started walking back as he'd instructed. The man watched her for a moment, his eyes following her footsteps. He seemed surprised by how calmly she accepted his warning. Most tourists he met argued or acted carelessly, but this girl had listened quietly, almost too quietly. Still, he didn't think much about it. He simply assumed she was another visitor who would stay for a few days and leave, without understanding the mountains the way locals did. Ayla walked slowly, trying not to show her embarrassment. She scolded herself silently for not paying attention to the path. When she reached the safer trail, she paused and looked back. The rugged man was still standing there, now leaning on his walking stick, watching the mountains instead of her. His presence looked strong and rooted, like he belonged here completely. Ayla wondered briefly about him. Was he a guide, a forest ranger? A local who spent most of his time exploring the hills? She didn't know, and she didn't expect to meet him again. To her, he was just a stranger who happened to see her at the wrong moment. She continued walking until the path opened to a gentle slope that led to a small wooden bench. She sat there for a while, letting the cool wind brush against her face. The sky was turning orange as the sun prepared to set behind the mountains. The sight was calming. She felt grateful to be here, even though her first encounter with a local had been slightly awkward. The mountains looked peaceful, unaware of the stories and pain she carried inside her. Ayla took a slow breath, feeling her eyes soften. She didn't come here to impress anyone. She came here to breathe, to feel alive again. She didn't know that the man she met, the one who warned her so sharply, would soon become an important part of her journey. She didn't know that behind his rough voice was a heart that had also suffered silently. And she certainly didn't know that one day her hidden scars would change the way he looked at her completely. For now, she was just a city girl trying to find peace in the mountains, unaware that destiny had already started arranging their next meeting. Ayla woke up early the next morning, even before the sun had fully risen. The mountain air was colder than she expected, but it felt refreshing. She wrapped her scarf around her neck, made herself a warm cup of tea in the guest house kitchen, and opened the window. The view outside looked like a painting, thin fog floating between the trees. Sunlight pushing slowly through the clouds, and the sound of the river flowing somewhere nearby. She smiled softly. This was exactly what she wanted from this trip. Peace, silence, and space to breathe. After finishing her tea, she wore her hiking shoes and stepped outside for a quiet walk. The village was just waking up. A few shopkeepers were opening their shutters, a woman fed chickens in her yard, and two little children ran around chasing each other with playful laughter. It all felt warm and homely. As Ayla walked to the small store to buy some snacks for the day, she noticed the shopkeeper greeting everyone by name. When her turn came, he smiled politely. "You're the new visitor, right? Staying at the Hillview Guest House?" Ayla nodded with a gentle smile. "Yes. I arrived yesterday." The shopkeeper handed her a packet of crackers and a small fruit basket. "If you plan to explore the trails, take these. The weather can change quickly." "Thank you," she replied gratefully. As she stepped out of the store, she unexpectedly saw a familiar figure walking toward the trail area. It was the same rugged mountain man from the previous day, Rehan. Today he wore a dark jacket and carried a heavier backpack. His walk was steady, confident, and purposeful, just like someone who belonged completely to the mountains. Ayla hesitated for a second. She didn't want another awkward moment. She told herself she would simply walk past him without disturbing him, but fate had different plans. Rayhan reached the river crossing first and paused there, waiting for a group of villagers carrying logs to pass. Ayla ended up walking right behind him. When he turned slightly, his eyes fell on her, and his expression shifted for just a moment. Not angry, not annoyed, just a brief flicker of recognition. "You again," he said quietly. Ayla felt her cheeks warm. I'm just going for a walk." Rayhan raised an eyebrow, but his tone was less sharp than yesterday. "On the safe trail this time, I hope." Ayla gave a small, polite smile. "Yes, I learned my lesson." He didn't smile back, but his eyes softened a little. Without another word, he continued walking, and Ayla kept a little distance behind him. She didn't want to bother him. She simply followed the path, observing trees, rocks, and tiny wildflowers along the way. After a while, the trail split into two. One path led to the viewpoint, the other deeper into the pine woods. Ayla paused, unsure, and checked the small map she had received at the guest house. Before she could decide, Rayhan spoke from ahead of her. "The viewpoint is this way," he said, pointing to the left. His voice was calm this time, not commanding. Ayla thanked him gently and took the correct turn. She sensed he wasn't the type to talk much, so she didn't try to start a conversation. But the more she walked, the more she realized she kept crossing paths with him in the most unexpected ways. Later in the afternoon, Ayla decided to sit near the riverbank, where the water flowed gently over smooth stones. She dipped her hands in the cold water, feeling its freshness. She stayed there for a long time, simply listening to nature. When she looked up, she saw Rayhan across the river, standing on a rock and checking a wooden fence that protected a narrow slope. He seemed focused, carefully tightening a loose piece of rope. Ayla watched from a distance without making it obvious. She noticed something new about him. Though he looked tough and serious, he wasn't careless or arrogant. Every movement he made showed responsibility, like he protected the mountains and the village in his own quiet way. After finishing his work, Rayhan crossed the river using the stepping stones. Ayla stood up to leave, trying not to seem like she had been staring at him. "You're far from the guest house," he said as he approached. Ayla shook her head slightly. "I just wanted some fresh air." "This area gets foggy in the evenings," Rayhan replied. "It's better not to stay alone for long." Although his tone still carried a warning, it didn't hurt her feelings this time. She sensed he wasn't trying to scold her. He was concerned in his own rough way. "I'll start heading back," she said softly. Rayhan walked past her, but then he stopped and turned around slightly. "The fog comes from behind that hill. It rises suddenly. If you see it getting white and thick, return quickly." Ayla nodded. "Thank you for telling me." He gave a small nod and walked away, disappearing into the trees like a shadow that knew its home. But nature had its own plans for both of them. As Ayla walked on the trail back to the village, a sudden thin mist began to rise from the lower part of the forest. She remembered Rayhan's warning. She knew she should hurry, but the fog thickened faster than she expected. Soon the path looked unfamiliar, and she could only see a few feet ahead. She stayed calm. She didn't panic or call out loudly. Instead, she sat on a large, flat rock beside the trail and waited for the fog to settle. She had learned long ago that staying calm was better than moving blindly. Minutes later, footsteps approached. They were heavy but controlled. Ayla looked up through the fog and recognized the familiar figure approaching with steady steps, Rayhan. He looked surprised to see her sitting so calmly. "You didn't try to walk through the fog?" Ayla shook her head. "I thought it was safer to wait." Rayhan studied her quietly for a moment, Most tourists panicked in even a little fog, but she looked composed, almost peaceful. He wasn't expecting that. "You made the right choice," he said simply. "Come on. The path is clear on the other side." Ayla stood up and followed him. They walked silently for several minutes. Rayhan slowed his pace, making sure she could keep up. It was a small gesture, but Ayla noticed it. Once they reached clearer ground, Rayhan spoke again. "Not everyone stays this calm. You're different from most visitors." Ayla looked down, unsure what to say. "I've learned to stay calm during difficult moments." Rayhan sensed there was a deeper meaning behind her words, but he didn't ask. He wasn't the type to question someone's personal life. Still, something about her quietness made him curious. She didn't seem like someone who traveled for fun. She carried a certain softness mixed with hidden strength. They reached the point where the trail opened toward the village. Rayhan stopped walking. "You'll be fine from here," he said briefly. Ayla nodded. "Thank you for your help. And for not speaking as sharply as yesterday." Rayhan actually let out a tiny breath that almost sounded like a faint laugh. "Yesterday you were walking into the wrong area. Anyone would have warned you." Ayla smiled gently. "Still, thank you." For a moment, their eyes met. A brief, simple moment with no expectations, no assumptions, just quiet recognition of each other's presence. Rayhan lifted his walking stick slightly and turned toward the forest. Ayla walked toward the village path. Both thought that was the end of their encounter. But something unexpected had already begun between them. Something small, silent, and growing slowly like a seed beneath the soil. Ayla walked back with lighter steps, unaware that Rayhan's image had already settled quietly in her mind. At the same time, Rayhan walked deeper into the woods, unaware that he would soon think about her calm eyes and peaceful presence more often than he expected. They didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of their connection, a connection created by the mountains themselves. The next few days passed softly, like gentle pages turning in a quiet book. Ayla spent her mornings exploring safe trails, her afternoons resting by the river, and her evenings watching the sunset paint the sky with soft colors. Each day felt like a small gift, a moment of healing she didn't know she needed this much. Still, something else kept happening. She kept seeing Rayhan. Sometimes she saw him fixing a broken fence near the river. Sometimes he was checking mountain paths or talking to villagers. Sometimes he simply passed by her on the trail, giving a small nod of acknowledgement. He never talked much, but he also never ignored her. Their meetings were not planned, but they continued happening, as if the mountains themselves were bringing them together. Ayla didn't mind these quiet encounters. She liked his calm presence. He was strong and serious, yet strangely gentle when he spoke. And even though he always seemed busy, she could sense he cared deeply about the mountains and the people living here. One afternoon, the village held a small festival to celebrate the arrival of the summer season. Colorful cloth banners hung between wooden houses, and children ran around holding little paper windmills. The smell of warm food floated through the air, and soft music played from an old radio placed on a wooden table. Ayla decided to walk through the festival area. She looked at handmade crafts, tasted local snacks, and enjoyed watching families laugh together. Everything felt cheerful and simple, something she had missed for years. As she walked near a small wooden post decorated with flowers, someone bumped into her by accident. Her sleeve slipped up slightly, revealing a faint mark on her arm. She quickly pulled the fabric down again, hoping no one noticed. A group of kids ran past, laughing, and the moment seemed to pass harmlessly. But someone had noticed. Rayhan, who had been speaking with an older villager nearby, turned his head just in time to see Ayla adjusting her sleeve quickly, almost nervously. The small movement caught his attention. It wasn't the kind of movement someone made unless they were trying to hide something. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in concern. Ayla felt a small wave of embarrassment, though she didn't know anyone had seen. She walked away from the crowd and found a quieter corner near a wooden fence. She leaned against it and looked down at her hand. The memories she tried to bury rose again, but she took a deep breath and pushed them away. She didn't come here to think about the past, but before she could steady her thoughts, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw Rayhan standing there, holding 2 cups of warm tea. He didn't offer her a cup gently like a romantic hero. He simply placed it near her on the fence, as if he didn't want to make a big deal out of it. "You look tired," he said in a calm voice. Ayla blinked. "I'm fine. Just needed some fresh air." "You walked away quickly." His tone was simple, not questioning but observant. Ayla forced a small smile. "Crowds exhaust me sometimes." Rayhan didn't argue. He stood beside her, both of them quietly sipping their tea. For a while, neither spoke. The festival noises felt far away. Only the sound of wind brushing through the trees reached their ears. After a long moment, Rayhan spoke again, but this time more softly. "You don't have to hide anything here." Ayla stiffened just slightly. She didn't know how to reply. Her fingers tightened around the warm cup. She could feel his eyes watching her, not in judgment, but with a kind of gentle understanding. She hesitated. For years, she avoided talking about her scars, not because they were dark or dangerous memories, but because people reacted with too much pity or too many questions, and she hated both. But here, with Rayhan, things felt different. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't guessing. He was simply giving her space. Ayla took a slow breath. "It's nothing, just some old marks." Rayhan didn't look away. "Old doesn't mean they don't matter." Ayla was quiet. His words felt simple, but they carried weight. She didn't know how someone who barely spoke could say things that felt so meaningful. Maybe it was time to speak. Not everything. Just a little. She stared at the far mountains, letting her voice come out slowly. "I had an accident years ago, a very bad one. I don't want to share the details, but it left marks, not just on my skin, but inside too." Rayhan listened without interrupting. There was no surprise in his eyes, no pity, no shock, only sincerity. Ayla appreciated that more than she expected. "I came here to clear my mind," she continued, "to breathe, to start feeling normal again. I don't want people to look at my scars and think about the past. I'm tired of people seeing me through my pain." Rayhan nodded softly. "These mountains don't care about scars." Ayla almost laughed, but it came out as a small breath. "Maybe that's why I like it here." Rayhan looked at her with quiet understanding. "Everyone carries something. You don't have to explain it to anyone." Ayla felt her chest loosen, as if a tight knot finally relaxed. She glanced at him. "What about you? You always look like someone who keeps things inside." Rayhan looked toward the distant hills. "I lost someone on the mountain long ago, a person I cared about. It changed how I see everything." Ayla felt a warm ache in her heart. Not pity, just human connection. They were both wounded souls in different ways. But standing here together felt strangely comforting. Before she could respond, a group of children ran by again, laughing loudly. The moment softened, and Ayla looked down at her cup. She didn't realize she had finished her tea. Rayhan cleared his throat quietly. "Do you want to walk by the river? It's quieter there." Ayla nodded gently. "Yes, I'd like that." They walked side by side, not touching, not rushing, simply existing near each other. The festival sounds faded behind them as the river's soft flow welcomed their silence. Ayla felt lighter than she had in years. Being around someone who didn't judge her, didn't rush her, didn't treat her like she was broken. It felt new and peaceful. Rayhan felt something shift inside him, too. Ayla's calmness, her honesty, her gentle way of speaking, it made him see her differently. Not as a fragile visitor, not as a careless city girl, but as someone strong and quiet, someone who had survived more than she said. They reached a flat stone near the river and sat there. The evening sun painted the water gold. Ayla spoke softly. "Thank you for listening." Rayhan replied with the same softness. "Thank you for trusting." They didn't need more words. The moment spoke for them. The mountains around them felt like silent witnesses to a connection that had begun so quietly, yet so deeply. They had both carried scars, one visible, one invisible. And now, sitting beside each other, they felt a little less alone. They didn't know what the coming days would bring, but one thing was certain. Something had changed between them. Something warm, delicate, and honest, like the first drop of rain before a gentle storm of healing. The days that followed flowed more gently than Ayla expected. Every morning she woke up with a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time: calmness. It was a quiet feeling, not loud or overwhelming, just soft like the morning fog that wrapped the mountains. She didn't know if it was the peaceful environment, the long walks, or the rare but meaningful conversations with Rayhan, but something inside her was slowly healing. Their meetings were no longer accidental. Sometimes Ayla would walk along the river and find Rayhan repairing a wooden railing. Sometimes he would pass by the guest house and pause to give her a small nod, as if silently checking that she was doing all right. Other times they would walk together on the safer trails, talking little, but feeling comfortable in the silence. One afternoon, Ayla told the guest house owner she wanted to explore a small lake hidden deeper in the mountains. The owner smiled and told her it was a beautiful place, but suggested she take someone with her because the path could be confusing. Ayla thought for a moment, then thanked him and walked outside. Almost as if the mountains were timing everything perfectly, she saw Rayhan near the old bridge, talking with one of the villagers. He noticed her standing a little distance away and quietly ended his conversation. "You look like you have something to say," Rayhan said as he approached. Ayla gave a soft smile. "I heard there's a lake deeper in the mountains. I want to see it, but the owner said the path is confusing." Rayhan nodded slowly. "He's right. People often lose their way." Ayla hesitated. Her hands were softly folded around her scarf. "Would you show me the way?" It wasn't a bold or demanding request. It was quiet, respectful, almost hopeful. Rayhan studied her expression for a moment. He wasn't used to people asking him for help like this. Most visitors hired guides or joined groups. But Ayla wasn't like them. She didn't rush. She didn't treat the mountains like entertainment. He nodded. "I'll take you." Ayla's smile brightened gently, and they began their walk toward the forest. The path started easy but slowly grew narrower, surrounded by tall pine trees. The sunlight filtered through the branches, creating patterns on the ground like nature's artwork. Ayla walked beside Rayhan, matching his pace. She felt comfortable. The mountains felt familiar now, and Rayhan felt like a steady presence, someone she trusted without doubt. As they walked deeper, Ayla noticed something about him, the way he stopped to touch the bark of certain trees, as if checking their health, the way he listened carefully to sounds around them, the small smile that appeared when a squirrel crossed the path. He had a bond with the mountains that she admired. After almost an hour of walking, the trees opened into a wide clearing, and Ayla gasped softly. The lake lay in front of them like a piece of glass reflecting the sky. The water was clear, calm, and peaceful. Little ripples formed wherever the wind touched the surface. Tall grass danced softly along the edges, and bright yellow flowers grew near the water, adding small touches of color. It's beautiful, Ayla whispered. Rayhan nodded. Not many visitors come here. It's too quiet for them. Ayla sat near the water, dipping her fingers into the cool surface. Quiet is good, she said. Sometimes silence heals more than words. Rayhan looked at her for a moment. Her gentle voice, her soft expression, her calm acceptance of the world. Everything about her felt different from the noisy city visitors he usually saw. They remained near the lake for a long time. Ayla watched the reflection of clouds moving slowly across the surface. Rayhan collected a few fallen branches to clear the path. Their activities were simple, but they shared them comfortably. After a while, Ayla sat back on the grass, hugging her knees lightly. Rayhan, she said, her voice steady but soft. Can I ask you something? He set the branches aside and turned to face her. Why do you live here alone? She asked. The village people say you spend most of your time in the mountains. Rayhan looked at the lake for a few seconds before answering. Because it's peaceful. The mountains don't lie, they don't judge, and they don't pretend. They're honest, even when they're dangerous. Ayla listened quietly. He continued. I lost someone important years ago. After that, the mountains became the only place where I felt like I could breathe freely. Ayla didn't ask for details. She respected the quietness of his pain. She felt connected to him in a way she couldn't fully explain. Their scars were different, but the hurt behind them was similar. The breeze grew stronger, brushing Ayla's hair across her face. Rayhan reached out instinctively and gently moved a loose strand behind her ear. His fingers barely touched her skin, but the moment felt unexpectedly warm. Ayla looked at him, surprised but not uncomfortable. He pulled his hand back quickly, as if realizing what he had done. Sorry, he murmured. Ayla shook her head slowly. It's okay. Their eyes met, a quiet, deep moment neither expected. It wasn't romantic in a loud or dramatic way. It was soft, honest, almost healing. But then the sky darkened slightly. A patch of thick clouds gathered above the hills. We should head back, Rayhan said. The weather is changing. Ayla agreed, and they started walking. But the path, which had been calm earlier, now felt different. The wind picked up, rustling the branches above. A few dry leaves swirled around their feet. Is it going to rain? Ayla asked. Maybe. But we'll be fine if we keep moving. They continued walking, but the clouds grew darker. Soon they heard a distant rumble. Not thunder, something heavier. Rayhan stopped, listening carefully. That's not rain, he said. That's the sound of falling rocks. Ayla's heart skipped. Before she could speak, a strong wind hit them, followed by a cracking sound somewhere higher up the slope. Rayhan grabbed her hand without thinking. Move, he said, guiding her off the narrow path. A few seconds later, small stones rolled down the hillside, bouncing past them. They weren't large, but enough to make the path dangerous. Rayhan held Ayla close to keep her steady as the ground trembled lightly. They waited until the movement stopped. Are you okay? Rayhan asked, still holding her arm. Ayla nodded, trying to calm her rapid breathing. Yes. What was that? Sometimes loose rocks fall after strong winds, Rayhan explained. It's rare, but it happens. They both stayed still for a moment, letting the tension fade. Rayhan looked at her again, checking her expression. You didn't panic, he said, sounding slightly surprised. Ayla gave a small, tired smile. I'm used to unexpected moments. Rayhan didn't say anything, but his eyes stayed on her a little longer than usual, thoughtful, respectful, almost admiring. As they walked back toward the village, the wind softened again, and the danger passed. Ayla stayed close to Rayhan, not out of fear, but because his presence felt safe, solid, trustworthy. When they reached the open area near the river, Ayla turned to him with a grateful expression. "Thank you for everything today." Rayhan shook his head lightly. "You don't have to thank me." She smiled softly. "I want to." The way she looked at him made something warm stir in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. He didn't express it, but she felt it anyway. As Ayla walked back toward the village and Rayhan into the forest, both carried a new awareness inside them, something deeper than friendship, something gentle and growing slowly, like a quiet flame in cold weather. Neither of them said it aloud, but both knew. Their hearts had started moving toward each other, step by quiet step. Ayla woke up earlier than she planned on her last morning in the mountains. The soft light of dawn was slipping through the small window of her wooden cabin. The village was still quiet, wrapped in the gentle blue shade of early morning. For a long moment she lay still on the bed, listening to the calm sounds outside, the distant flow of the river, the soft rustle of leaves, and the far-off call of a morning bird. It all felt peaceful, familiar, and strangely comforting. Something inside her felt different, as if these mountains had slowly become a safe place she didn't want to leave. She sat up slowly and touched the old wooden wall beside her. A week ago, she had come here looking for silence, trying to run away from the memories that always followed her. Now, she had found something much more than silence. She had found someone who understood her pain without asking for details. She had found a place that made her feel strong instead of broken. A soft knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. Ayla opened it to find Rayhan standing outside. He looked calm. But there was something in his eyes, something he wasn't saying out loud. He had probably been up for hours, the same way he always woke before the sun. He gave her a small smile. "You ready?" he asked. Ayla nodded. She didn't need to ask where they were going. She already knew. It was the same place he once warned her to stay away from. The place she had wanted to see since the first day. The viewpoint at the top of the early trail. They began walking through the quiet village. The air was cold, but it felt fresh and clean. Ayla wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and followed Rayhan up the narrow path. The world around them was still waking up. A few lights glowed softly in the distant homes, and the smell of early morning tea drifted through the wind. Rayhan walked beside her, not ahead like he used to. There was no rush in his steps. He stayed close, making sure she was comfortable with the climb. It was a small thing, but it made her feel safe. As they walked, Ayla tried to take in every detail around her. The shapes of the trees, the sound of small stones under their shoes, the way the sky brightened slowly. She didn't know when she would see all this again. She didn't even know when she would return. The thought made her heart feel heavy. Rayhan broke the silence after a while. "You don't have to go today." Ayla looked at him with surprise. He wasn't someone who spoke emotionally, and he rarely said more than necessary. Hearing these words from him meant a lot. She understood what he was trying to say without him needing to explain. "I know," she said softly, "but I think I have to." Rayhan nodded slowly, even though he didn't look happy about it. He had always respected her choices. Maybe that was why she felt comfortable around him. He never tried to control her or judge her. They continued walking up the trail. The path became steeper, but Rayhan kept slowing down so she wouldn't feel pressured. Ayla appreciated his quiet kindness. She remembered how different he had been the first day, strict, distant, and quick to push people away. But now his silence felt warm, not cold. His presence felt like a shield, not a wall. When they finally reached the viewpoint, the sky had turned golden. The mountains stretched before them like a painting. The sun was just beginning to rise, sending soft light across the valley. Ayla's breath caught in her throat. It was more beautiful than she had imagined. She stepped forward slowly, feeling the cool wind brush against her face. Rayhan stood beside her, watching the horizon. "This is the place I didn't want you to come to," he said calmly. "I remember," Ayla replied with a small smile. "I wasn't trying to be rude," he said. "I just didn't want anything to happen to you." Ayla looked up at him. There was no hardness in his voice anymore, only honesty. She appreciated that more than anything. "I know that now," she said softly, "and thank you for everything." Rayhan didn't speak for a moment. He looked at her as if searching for the right words. "When you came here, I thought you were like every visitor. Curious for a few days, then gone. I didn't think I'd meet someone who understands the mountains the way you do, someone who understands silence." Ayla felt something warm spread in her chest. She didn't know how to reply. Instead, she looked at the rising sun, letting the light wash over her. Rayhan continued more quietly this time. "I also didn't think I'd meet someone who would make me feel less alone." The honesty in his voice took her by surprise. Rayhan wasn't someone who shared his feelings easily. Ayla turned toward him, smiling gently. "You're not alone," she said. "Not anymore." He looked at her, something soft in his expression. "You helped me remember that people can be trusted again." Ayla held his gaze. "And you helped me remember that I'm stronger than I thought." They stood together in silence, watching the sun climb higher. The world around them felt calm and open, as if it was giving them permission to take the next step in their lives. Ayla didn't know what the future held for her, but she felt more at peace than she had in a long time. After a while, Rayhan cleared his throat. "You know, you don't have to leave everything behind. If you ever want to come back, the mountains will always be here." "And so will I." Ayla felt her heart tighten, not in pain, but in something warm and hopeful. She nodded slowly. "I will come back," she said softly. "This place has given me more than I expected. And you—" She paused, trying to find the right words. "You helped me heal without forcing me to talk about things. That means more than you know." Rayhan looked down at the ground, a shy smile touching his face. "I didn't do anything special." "You did," she said firmly. "You didn't treat me like someone weak. You didn't make me feel broken. You just let me be myself." Rayhan exhaled deeply, as if her words eased something inside him. He took a small step closer, not too near, but enough to show he cared. "Ayla," he said quietly, "no matter where you go, remember this. Your past doesn't control you. You survived it, and that makes you stronger than most people I know." Ayla smiled, her eyes growing warm. "Thank you, Rayhan. Truly." They stayed there until the sun fully rose, painting the mountains in bright gold. Ayla wished the moment could last longer, but she knew time wouldn't stop for her. Still, she felt grateful for every second. On the walk back down, Rayhan stayed close beside her. His presence felt steady, reliable. Ayla kept memorizing everything: the sound of his footsteps, the scent of wild pine trees, the view of the valley that had comforted her so many times. When they reached her cabin, her small bag was already packed. Rayhan looked at it and then at her, his jaw tightening slightly. He didn't want her to go, but he wasn't going to stop her either. Ayla took a deep breath and smiled gently. "I'll come back," she said. Rayhan nodded. "I'll be here." She walked a few steps toward the vehicle, waiting to take her back to the town. Then she stopped and turned around. "Rayhan," she called softly. He looked up. "Thank you for seeing me beyond my scars." His expression softened. "And thank you for reminding me that reopening your heart doesn't always mean breaking it again." Ayla held his gaze for one last moment. Then she stepped into the vehicle. As it began to move, she looked back at the mountains and at Rihan standing there, steady like the land he belonged to. The road ahead of her was long, but she felt no fear. She felt powerful, hopeful, and deeply grateful. Some journeys change your path, some journeys change your heart, and some journeys, like hers, help you discover the strength you always carried inside. The mountains stayed behind her, but the peace they gave her would stay with her forever. And maybe someday soon she would return, not to escape her past, but to continue writing a new story in a place where she finally felt seen.